On the 13th of December 2024, a Ukrainian pilot flying an F-16 knocked 6 Russian cruise missiles out of the sky using only 4 air-to-air missiles and the jet's own 20mm cannon, all of these during one combat mission. You would not actually be out of your mind if you think it's all too cinematic to be a real combat mission. That, in effect, sums up the F-16. This jet has done the impossible over and over again. It's fast, it's deadly, and it was never supposed to last this long. When the F-16 first took off in 1974, no one imagined it would still be dominating battlefields 50 years later, outliving aircraft that were meant to replace it. While defense contractors pour billions into developing the next generation of stealth fighters, this single lightweight jet built on a shoestring budget became the backbone of air forces across the world. This is the story of aviation's most successful underdog, the jet that simply refuses to die. If this surprises you so far, pause for a second and ask yourself, how many modern weapons do you actually know that improved with age instead of disappearing? Keep that thought because the F-16 is about to challenge a lot of assumptions. On December 27, 1992, high above the desert of southern Iraq, an F-16D Fighting Falcon from the 33rd Fighter Wing cut through the winter sky. The jet belonged to the 58th Fighter Squadron, deployed to enforce the no-fly zone under Operation Southern Watch. Its radio call sign that day was Bandog 01. In the cockpit sat Captain Gary North with Lieutenant Colonel Dan Bakke in the rear seat. Their mission was supposed to be routine: monitor Iraqi airspace, deter violations, go home. Nothing flashy, nothing heroic. Then the warning tones began. An Iraqi MiG-25 Foxbat, one of the fastest interceptor aircraft ever built, had crossed into restricted airspace. Designed to streak in at extreme speed, fire, and escape before anyone could react, the Foxbat was a predator built for altitude and velocity. It was higher, it was faster, and it was accelerating. By every Cold War rulebook, the F-16 should have disengaged. Instead, Bandog 01 turned toward the threat. At the very edge of radar range, Captain North achieved a fleeting lock. There would be no second chance. With seconds remaining, he fired a single AIM-120 AMRAAM. The missile climbed silently into thin air, activated its own radar, and hunted on its own. The Foxbat pilot never received a warning. Moments later, the radar return vanished. The MiG-25 was gone. It was the first confirmed combat kill by an AMRAAM in history, a fire-and-forget shot that rewrote air combat doctrine overnight. A lightweight, single-engine fighter had just destroyed one of the world's fastest interceptors. From that moment on, air warfare would never be the same. In Operation Desert Storm, over 250 F-16 were fielded out of the total 1,700 combat aircraft fielded by coalition forces. It would also go on to fly one of the most sorties of any aircraft, ostensibly due to both its availability and lower cost. Before I explain why this worked, make a prediction. Was the F-16 built for speed, stealth, or turning fights? Lock in your guess, then watch how the real answer surprises people. If you lined up every F-16 ever built, the row would stretch for miles. Over 4,600 units have been produced since its introduction, making it one of the most widely used fighter jets in history, second only to the legendary MiG-21. But unlike the MiG, which has largely faded from frontline service, the F-16 remains in active production nearly 50 years later. From NATO airfields in Europe to desert bases in the Middle East, this single-engine marvel has flown in more than 25 countries and logged over 19 million flight hours. Lockheed Martin's facility in Greenville, South Carolina, continues building new F-16s today, with orders stretching years into the future. The numbers tell a remarkable story, but they don't capture the revolution this aircraft represented. The F-16 wasn't supposed to be a legend. When General Dynamics began sketching designs in the early 1970s, they were building what the Air Force called a lightweight fighter, basically the aviation equivalent of a budget sedan. The Pentagon already had its luxury models, the massive F-15 Eagle for air superiority and a complex F-111 for long-range strikes. What they needed was something simpler, cheaper, and available in large numbers. What they got instead was an aircraft that would fundamentally reshape modern air combat. The F-16 story starts with a bold idea, that agility, not size, wins dogfights. During the Vietnam War, American pilots realized that heavy radar-loaded aircraft couldn't always turn or accelerate fast enough to survive in close combat. The U.S. Air Force wanted something different, a pure fighter that could dance through the sky rather than lumber across it. That's where the F-16 came in. Designed by General Dynamics, it broke every rule of the time. Instead of relying on brute force or armor, it used aerodynamic finesse. The F-16 was the first production fighter designed to be aerodynamically unstable, meaning it was naturally unbalanced and couldn't fly straight without constant computer correction. Sounds crazy, right? But that instability gave it lightning-fast maneuverability that conventional designs simply couldn't match. To keep this unstable bird in the air, engineers created a revolutionary fly-by-wire system, a computer network that translated the pilot's stick movements into electronic signals rather than mechanical cables. This was groundbreaking technology in an era when most fighters still relied on mechanical linkages. The result was an aircraft so responsive that pilots said it felt like wearing the jet. Imagine riding a bicycle with the seat positioned too far back. You'd constantly tip over without making continuous corrections. The F-16's computers make those corrections hundreds of times per second, giving pilots unprecedented agility. It could pull 9 Gs, or 9 times the force of gravity, and still hold together. And then there's that cockpit view. Instead of sitting high under a metal canopy like older jets, the F-16 pilot sits under a frameless bubble canopy that provides a near 360-degree view. There are no obstructions, no blind spots, just pure visibility in every direction. The seat is reclined at a 30-degree angle to help the pilot withstand extreme G-forces during high-speed maneuvers, allowing sharper turns and longer dogfights. The stick is mounted on the right side rather than between the pilot's legs, and the throttle contains dozens of controls, allowing pilots to manage weapons and systems without removing their hands from the primary flight controls. Its engine, originally the Pratt & Whitney F-100, later joined by General Electric's F-110, can push the aircraft past Mach 2, or more than 1,500 miles per hour. But raw speed isn't its secret weapon. This single-engine approach was risky. Traditionalists worried about reliability, but it dramatically reduced costs and complexity while delivering an incredible thrust-to-weight ratio. The F-16 could accelerate vertically and outmaneuver larger opponents with ease. The real genius lies in versatility. The F-16 can switch roles mid-mission from air superiority to ground attack, reconnaissance, or even electronic warfare. It carries everything from AIM-120 AMRAAMs to Sidewinders for air combat, to JDAMs and Maverick missiles for ground targets. An F-16 can employ virtually every weapon in the Western arsenal, from Vietnam-era bombs to cutting-edge precision missiles. This flexibility made it the perfect jet for countries that couldn't afford entire fleets of specialized aircraft. Quick check, did you expect a 1970s jet to still matter this much? Hold that thought, because the next design choice is where the F-16 becomes a legend. If you had to choose right now, one perfect jet or 3 good enough jets, what's your pick? Drop it in the comments. Modern war punishes the wrong answer. Currently, the F-16 serves in 25 air forces across every inhabited continent, from the deserts of the Middle East to the fjords of Norway, from the tropical islands of Singapore to the plains of Poland. This single-engine marvel stands ready on runways worldwide. It's the backbone of NATO's aerial strength, the guardian of Israel's contested skies, and the frontline defender for nations as diverse as Taiwan, Turkey, Ukraine, and Thailand. No other Western fighter jet has achieved this level of global ubiquity. Nations from Belgium to Indonesia bought it. Israel used it to destroy Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in Operation Opera in 1981, a surgical strike that demonstrated the jet's precision and capability. The U.S. deployed it in Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. Israeli F-16s hold an unmatched combat record with over 300 confirmed air-to-air victories without a single loss in aerial combat. The F-16 has scored over 70 air-to-air kills across various conflicts while maintaining one of the lowest loss rates among frontline fighters. It served longer and more wars and under more flags than almost any other modern fighter. Today, a modernized version, the F-16 Block 70/72, is still rolling off assembly lines in South Carolina. It comes with a new AESA radar, advanced mission computers, upgraded cockpits, and modern data links that let it work seamlessly with fifth-generation jets like the F-35. The latest variants have more computing power in their cockpits than existed in entire countries when the original Fighting Falcon took flight. So how did a jet from the 1970s not just survive, but thrive in the era of stealth fighters? To understand the F-16's staying power, you have to rewind to the Cold War. The 1960s and 70s were a golden age of experimental aircraft, massive budgets, constant innovation, and fierce rivalries between US and Soviet engineers. Fighter jets were becoming increasingly complex, expensive, and specialized. The Air Force's premier fighter, the F-15 Eagle, cost around $30 million per unit at the time, nearly $100 million in today's terms, or approximately $150 million when adjusted for modern military inflation. While extraordinarily capable, this price tag meant air forces could only afford limited numbers. Smaller nations needed something cheaper but still capable. The question became, could you build something simpler and less expensive that still delivered exceptional performance? Enter the Lightweight Fighter Program, a competition between two prototypes, the YF-16 from General Dynamics and the YF-17 from Northrop. Both were built to prove that smaller, more agile aircraft could hold their own against heavier jets. When the YF-16 made its first public flight in 1974, it stunned observers. Its performance was so smooth, so effortless, that the Air Force immediately chose it as the winner. The YF-17 didn't disappear, though. It went on to become the FA-18 Hornet for the US Navy. In a twist of fate, both prototypes became icons, proving that the lightweight fighter philosophy had merit across multiple services. Behind this competition was a group of fighter pilots and engineers known as the Fighter Mafia. These reformers believed that modern fighters had lost their way, becoming bloated with technology at the expense of basic performance. They advocated for a return to fundamentals, high thrust-to-weight ratio, superior maneuverability, and excellent pilot visibility. Their philosophy: it's better to have many good fighters than a few perfect ones. The F-16's designers believed in what they called energy maneuverability theory, the idea that the best fighter isn't the one that turns fastest, but the one that loses the least energy while doing so. The F-16 embodied that philosophy. Every part of its design, from its blended wing fuselage to its lightweight and single powerful engine, was tuned for efficiency. The Fighting Falcon embodied this thinking with groundbreaking design choices that challenged conventional wisdom. But here's what really set it apart. It was designed for human performance. The cockpit wasn't an afterthought, it was a masterpiece of ergonomics. The side-stick control gave pilots more space, and every button was placed within reach. The result: pilots felt like they were in direct symbiosis with the machine. That bond made the F-16 legendary among aviators. They called it the Viper after the sleek spacecraft from Battlestar Galactica because of its aggressive look and behavior. The name stuck, becoming the unofficial call sign that pilots still use today. If you're liking this style, big systems explained through real decisions, subscribe, because the next part is where the F-16 stops being a fighter and starts being a strategy tool. The F-16's initial success spawned what became known as the Deal of the Century. In 1975, 4 NATO nations, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway, agreed to purchase 348 F-16s collectively, with production sharing agreements that would spread manufacturing across Europe. This wasn't just an aircraft sale, it was an industrial partnership that created thousands of jobs, standardized NATO air forces, and established the F-16 as the Western fighter jet. During the Cold War, the US used arms sales as a way to build alliances, and the F-16 became the centerpiece of that strategy. Selling it to NATO allies standardized logistics, training, and weapons systems across the alliance. That made joint operations smoother and more effective. Over time, the jet evolved through countless upgrades, proving its fundamental design philosophy: create an adaptable platform that can evolve with technology. Unlike aircraft designed around specific missions or technologies, the Fighting Falcon was built as a flexible airframe that could accommodate upgrades. The Block 30 introduced better engines, the Block 40 added night vision and precision strike capabilities. The Block 50/52 brought advanced radar and electronic warfare systems. Each upgrade kept the F-16 competitive, even as newer aircraft like the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II entered service. Consider the radar systems as an example of this adaptability. Early F-16s carried mechanically scanned radars that could track a handful of targets simultaneously.
Modern variants feature AESA radars capable of tracking dozens of targets while simultaneously jamming enemy radars and conducting electronic reconnaissance. The airframe didn't change, the technology inside did. This ability to accept new systems kept the Fighting Falcon relevant through 5 decades of rapid technological change. And while those fifth-generation fighters were limited to a handful of nations due to their massive costs, the F-16 quietly continued spreading its wings globally. The F-35, designed as the F-16's replacement, costs roughly $80 million per aircraft, more than double the F-16's price tag. While the F-35 offers capabilities the F-16 cannot match, particularly stealth and sensor fusion, many nations find themselves asking familiar questions. Can we afford enough F-35s to meet our needs? Listen for the pattern here. Every time the world changes, the F-16 changes with it. See if you can catch how before I say it out loud. What makes the F-16's longevity even more remarkable is that it has remained relevant through one of the most revolutionary periods in military aviation. When it first flew in 1974, pilots still relied on analog instruments and mechanical controls. The cutting-edge technology of the era included vacuum tubes and magnetic tape. Today's F-16s incorporate fly-by-wire flight controls, active electronically scanned radars, advanced electronic warfare systems, and the ability to employ precision-guided munitions that didn't exist when the aircraft was designed. Even decades after the Cold War ended, the same logic of affordability and adaptability applies. The latest Block 70 version, purchased by countries like Slovakia, Bulgaria, and Taiwan, uses modern radar and digital avionics but keeps the proven airframe. Taiwan recently ordered 66 new F-16Vs, the latest variant featuring advanced AESA radar and upgraded avionics. These aircraft represent the cutting edge of fourth-generation fighter technology, proving that 5 decades after its first flight, the F-16 still has fight left in it. It's a symbol of continuity, a jet that bridges generations of technology. The global F-16 market continues expanding in ways that surprise even industry experts. Recent purchasers include Slovakia and Bulgaria, former Warsaw Pact nations replacing their aging Soviet-era jets with Fighting Falcons. This represents a dramatic shift. Nations that once flew MiGs now trust American engineering for their aerial defense. But it's not invincible, and honest assessment requires acknowledging limitations. Critics argue that the F-16's age and lack of stealth make it vulnerable in modern conflicts dominated by radar-evading aircraft and long-range missiles. In contested airspace against advanced adversaries with integrated air defense systems, a non-stealth fighter faces significant challenges. Yet many experts point out that numbers and adaptability often outweigh stealth alone. In massive conflicts, the ability to field hundreds of multi-role fighters quickly can be more decisive than having a few stealth jets that are difficult to maintain and expensive to replace. That's exactly why Ukraine has been lobbying to receive more F-16s from Western allies. Decades after the first AMRAAM kill rewrote air combat, the same aircraft entered a very different war. Over Ukraine, the F-16 does not hunt enemy fighters at high altitude. It flies lower, quieter, and under constant threat. The sky is crowded with radar beams, surface-to-air missiles, and cruise missiles skimming the terrain. There are no clean dogfights here, only seconds, signals, and decisions made in the dark. On one such night, a Ukrainian F-16 was scrambled to intercept an incoming missile wave aimed at civilian infrastructure. The target wasn't a jet, it was a cruise missile, small, fast, and deliberately hidden by terrain and electronic clutter. These are the hardest targets to stop. Ground defenses had already lost the track. Guided by networked sensors rather than eyesight, the pilot closed the distance. The radar contact flickered, then reappeared. There would be no visual confirmation, no warning to the target. One missile was fired. Moments later, the track vanished. No explosion lit the sky, no victory call echoed over the radio, but a city remained intact. Power stayed on, lives went uninterrupted. This is what the F-16 has become in Ukraine, not a symbol of air dominance, but a shield, quiet, precise, and unforgiving. 50 years after its first flight, the same jet that changed air combat once again proved it belongs in the fight. The jet's combination of affordability, capability, and widespread availability makes it ideal for nations trying to modernize fast. With the right training, an F-16 can go from sitting in a hangar to flying combat missions in months. The widespread use means spare parts, maintenance expertise, and weapons are readily available, a critical advantage during sustained operations. Its combat record provides concrete evidence for its effectiveness. Israeli, Pakistani, Turkish, and American pilots have all proven its lethality across diverse operating environments. When nations need to project air power, the F-16 remains their most trusted tool, not because it's the newest or most advanced, but because it works consistently under pressure. And while newer fighters like the F-35 dominate headlines with their advanced stealth and sensor fusion, many air forces still prefer the F-16's simplicity and reliability. It's easier to maintain, cheaper to operate, and more forgiving for pilots. A smaller nation can sustain an F-16 fleet with reasonable infrastructure investments. For nations without the specialized facilities, trained technicians, and massive budgets required to support high-maintenance stealth jets, the F-16 remains the logical choice.
The F-16 also continues to evolve in surprising ways that extend beyond traditional combat roles. The U.S. Air Force is now converting older F-16s into autonomous drones, part of the loyal wingman concept, where unmanned aircraft fly alongside manned jets. Imagine an AI-controlled F-16 carrying extra weapons, jamming enemy radar, or even taking enemy fire to protect its human counterpart. The same aircraft that once symbolized the pinnacle of manned flight is now helping shape the next era of unmanned warfare. This transformation demonstrates that even after 50 years, the F-16's basic design remains valuable enough to justify entirely new mission profiles. Perhaps most telling is what's happening with strategic planning across multiple air forces. For most nations, the answer to modernization involves continuing to fly F-16s alongside smaller numbers of more advanced jets. This high-low mix strategy, combining expensive fifth-generation stealth fighters with larger numbers of upgraded fourth-generation aircraft, has become the dominant approach to air power. The F-16 sits at the heart of this strategy, providing the numerical strength that stealth fighters alone cannot deliver. In many ways, the F-16's endurance mirrors the story of aviation itself, a balance between innovation and practicality. It proved that advanced technology doesn't always mean complexity or cost. Sometimes the simplest design, refined over decades, can outlast entire generations of supposedly superior systems. The Fighting Falcon demonstrates that in military aviation, perfection matters less than practicality, and adaptability beats absolute capability. It's not the stealthiest fighter, the longest-ranged fighter, or the most powerful fighter, but it might just be the smartest fighter, a design so fundamentally sound that it refuses to become obsolete. The F-16 proved that you don't need to be the biggest or most expensive to become essential. You just need to be good enough, adaptable enough, and reliable enough that nations keep choosing you year after year, decade after decade. For years, the United States treated the F-16 as a solved problem, a jet so common, so well understood that buying new ones seemed unnecessary. That assumption is quietly collapsing. Modern warfare is forcing the U.S. to confront an uncomfortable reality. America may need to start buying F-16s again, not as a relic, but as a strategic necessity. The first reason is capacity. Fifth-generation fighters like the F-35 and F-22 are powerful, but they are expensive, complex, and slow to produce. In a large-scale conflict, especially one involving multiple theaters, the limiting factor isn't technology, it's numbers. You can't patrol airspace, escort bombers, intercept cruise missiles, and provide close air support with a fleet that's too small to be everywhere at once. The F-16 fills that gap perfectly. Second is cost versus mission reality. Using a $100 million stealth fighter to shoot down drones, cruise missiles, or provide routine air policing is like using a supercomputer to check email. The F-16 can carry modern radars, advanced missiles, and networked sensors while costing a fraction to operate. That makes it ideal for high-tempo, everyday missions that would otherwise burn through elite assets. Third is industrial resilience. Recent conflicts have exposed how fragile defense supply chains really are. The
The F-16's production line already exists, its maintenance ecosystem is mature, and thousands of pilots and technicians know it inside out. Restarting large-scale procurement is faster and safer than betting everything on unproven next-generation programs. Finally, modernized F-16s aren't fighting alone. They operate as part of a network, sharing data with F-35s, drones, and ground systems. In that role, the F-16 becomes a missile truck, sensor node, and workhorse, amplifying the entire force. In an era defined by attrition, scale, and endurance, the jet America thought it outgrew may be exactly what it needs again. 50 years after its first flight, it's still soaring, still fighting, and still being built. Few machines in history have achieved that kind of legacy. The F-16 Fighting Falcon wasn't designed to dominate the 21st century, but somehow it's doing exactly that. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the newest. They're the ones that adapt, endure, and redefine the rules long after others are forgotten. That's one good fact about the F-16, the jet that refused to die. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you see modern warfare, you'll want to stay here. We break down the hidden logic behind global power, technology, and conflict, one clear fact at a time. Subscribe to One Good Fact.